Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear that bacon crackling in the background? I'm making a beautiful breakfast and I'm sitting down here. And one of my most favorite things after a great podcast, a profound podcast, is to do the intro. So with the smell of bacon in the background and the energy of fresh sunlight coming through my window, I'm going to intro you to Nasha Winters, who is a global healthcare authority. She is a best-selling author in the integrative cancer care region. She has certified and educated hundreds of professionals in the clinical use of mistletoe therapy. And she's created this robust educational program for healthcare institutions and the public, incorporating vetted integrative therapies in cancer care. She is also, I know, the list doesn't stop. She is focused on opening a comprehensive metabolic oncology hospital and research institute in the U.S. And it's going to have everything that is the best of the best. I could go on. We're going to get into it in the show. This was a 10 out of 10. My heart is reinvigorated with hope for the human race by talking with people like Nasha. I hope you feel the same way. Let's jump on in. Welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Kimmel, and on this show we explore the survivor's journey, practitioners making a difference, and the therapeutic treatments and transformational technology that allow the body to heal itself. Witness the inspiration we gain by navigating the human experience with grace, humility, and a healthy dose of mistakes. Because part of being human is being beautifully broken. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beautifully Broken podcast. We have the lovely Nasha Winters here on the show.
Yay! Blue tongue and all.
Blue tongue and all. You are mid Biohack. Do you want to just tell the audience what you're working on, maybe?
We were talking. Freddie has a great idea for the Biohack fails. And this morning I got a practice one. So we're in the process of developing a new delivery system for methylene blue and a combination formula. So I thought this morning at 5 a.m. I'd give it a try and see what I was feeling. I did not expect that 6 hours later I would still be Smurfy. So there we are. There it is. Yeah. That's my disclosure, my disclaimer.
Yeah. And that's not much of a fail. I mean,
there you go.
Right. You know, I've done some things. I want to think about. I'll give this one. This is so vulnerable. I've never told this on a podcast before, but in my early mess of I've got Lyme, cancer, and like horrible abdominal adhesions going on. So I'm like 4 surgeries in and I couldn't go to the bathroom. So, because I had so much scar tissue bound up. So I'm trying to work on these adhesions and somebody's like, oh, you need to do an enema. And I was like, great. I was like, never done one before. I was like, go down to the store, get an enema kit. Nothing. You know, like squirt bottles, nothing. He's like, oh. And then I'm like, let me get on, early, this is like 2009. So like health forums. Somebody's like, I got you, bro. You got to add a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to your enema kit. And I was like, okay. So I'm like Googling, right? This is where my non-detail oriented self got me in trouble. I was like, read the thing and I was like, great, 3 tablespoons of hydrogen peroxide. It was supposed to be 3 drops.
God.
Basically, chemical burn, diapers, bleeding. I was like, oh, horrible. But this is where health can really go sideways if we're not informed and we try to go out of desperation. I always say, look, it was always out of desperation. I had nothing, so I did a lot of stupid shit.
And you're still here to tell the really beautifully broken story of it all. So it's perfect. It's perfect.
The beautifully broken. Nasha, I want to let everybody in our audience know it's not Nasha, it's Nasha.
Thank you.
And I think neigh like a horse, like a little neigh. If we passed on the street and somebody said, what do you do? What would you tell them?
I collect people's stories. That would be one of my first knee-jerk reactions of what I do. So if I'm on an airplane and someone's, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm a story collector. So that usually kind of makes them pause. My next thing is I'm about helping people understand their terrain and helping them understand and support their terrain. And then third, I really focus with people dealing with cancer. And so I'm really clear not to say I treat cancer because I don't do that. And I also am very careful about saying things like there's a cure for cancer, or because I believe that cancer is simply a messenger and there's ways to meet it and work with it. And that story, the collection of that story is so integral of how I understand. So this is probably a Bruce Liptonism, which is very much about your biography dictates your biology and vice versa. And so to me, those two go so hand in hand.
That's beautiful. I was talking with a friend this morning. He is really struggling with some depression right now. And he's kind of in this on the teeter-totter of what does it all mean? It's either all a miracle or nothing is. And he had said, it's almost a relief to me to feel like it's just this one little poof and then that's it. And there's blackness. And he goes, I have less stress around that. And I said, look, this is the story I choose to tell myself, is that I believe everything's a miracle.
Yeah.
I always say cancer is the best thing that ever happened to me. We wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't have these evolved thoughts or this deep capacity to just be so empathetic and love people unconditionally that I don't know, had I not been through this crippling experience and then put it all back together. And that's my story. And it really works for me. And I don't have proof either way. But these are the guiding principles that I choose to latch on to. What would you say to someone in that position?
Well, I mean, first of all, I really relate to what your friend is going through, because at the time of my diagnosis at the age of 19, also god awful terminal process, the years leading up to that, I tried to snuff my own candle on several occasions. And so it seemed far easier to leave than to stay. And so for me, in that place where I would, to your friend hearing this, what I learned over time, thanks to my diagnosis, thanks to literally meeting my mortality face to face, was the understanding that I could have two very polarized belief systems inhabiting the same space at the same time. So I can still understand and believe that, hey, yep, death would be easier, or just giving up, or the poof could be easier. And I still choose to stay here on whatever level that means. I still choose to show up, lean into it, experience it, all of the ugliness and the painfulness of it, and all to move forward. And so to make room for both realities simultaneously, I think is really important. Pollyanna-ing over it and saying just think positive is absolutely, it would actually backfire for somebody like me, probably for somebody like you, and definitely for your friend. That actually almost just pisses you off and makes you want to just leave the building even faster when you get those placating, recommendations. So yeah, I think that just being okay with the fact that you can have that desire to leave and desire to stay happening simultaneously, and there's room for both.
Yeah, I deeply resonate with that. And it seems like everybody has a version of that right now in the world that we're living in. There's an inability to accept two truths that both exist in the same container. And it causes, you must see the amount of pain that causes people.
So much.
There can't be two. How can there be two truths? And I'm like,
right.
I see lots of double truths for lots of things. So I have to assume that they exist for everything. It's like, how do we redefine truth?
That's huge. That's huge. Well, and even specific to the cancer piece, like all these years out, standard of care would likely not consider me free of cancer, right? And so what's very interesting is I actually really push back against the concept when someone calls me a cancer survivor. I actually don't resonate with that at all, and correct people and say, I'm a cancer thriver. I still have cancer happening, but it's not taken over the building. Like there's like a mutual symbiotic relationship here. And I have a deep listening and deep awareness of that process in my body. And so I can choose to allow it to run the show, or I can stay in the driver's seat of that. And so that's that's a perspective that, unless you've walked this path, is probably very difficult to imagine. And even those on this path, what I find in my practice, and you probably have run across this, Freddie, in your experience, but I have so many people over 32 years of my career who have so focused on trying not to die that they completely forgot to live. And so while I have folks that are facing their mortality and perhaps facing, death in that moment, whatever that is, you can still live the crap out of life in the process. And that often is what kicks the can down the road a little bit further. So you do start to create a new reality, a parallel reality, a different perspective that allows things to happen. Again, making room for both. It's not either or, and it's not good or bad or a failure or a success.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that drives me crazy when it's defined.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I were just talking about a mutual friend who just passed recently, someone that we all hoped would continue because her light is so bright and continues to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, even in her absence, she changed all of us. And so she isn't gone. And just like the energy is neither created nor destroyed, we're just energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I get this. Do you know there's Sting wrote a musical called Last Ship?
No. Wow.
It's a story album, and he has a song called The Night That the Pugilist Learned How to Dance. It's a beautiful, beautiful song about a fighter and a boxer who always knew how to scrap. But his desire to evolve was rooted in the ability of a dance. And he found this energetic exchange that was happening. And he goes, this made my life beautiful. So he's trying to teach a younger human being that the value of the dance. I always think about cancer. It's a dance. We're dancing. Mm-hmm. There's times when you're in a power position and the times when you pull your energy off. And it's so interesting. And if we saw it that way, just because I understand the power of language, I was like, everybody's outcome would be different if we had that conversation. But I don't blame the programming, because when I think about all the things that were not me, that were given to me or put in me in school, it's like, you are awarded for achievement. That's when you're worthy of love. We like winners. You are the gold star. We want to be the quarterback. No one wants to be the water boy, right? And so of course, we live in this like very binary system of like, I'm going to fight. I love Rocky 3 too. I mean, it's Rocky. Is it Rocky 3? It's Rocky 4 when he fights the Russian, Ivan Drago.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's funny. I love that you bring this up because we claimed the war on cancer in 1971. That was the year of my birth. And so we look at that and no wonder you look at what it birthed from. We were in the midst of Vietnam. Prior to that, Korean War, World War II. Our world connected and understood this war ethos. And so it made sense to harness that ethos and turn it into something for good. Right. And so I appreciate that. And that belief system, like the battle, the war on cancer, the run for the cause, the fight for the cause, all those things, be a warrior, the F cancer movement, all these pieces came from that. And you can appreciate the power of it. And yet my personal, I guess, anthem in all of this is that I have a different understanding, different relationship with cancer, to understand that it is me. Those cells are not outside of me. They're not foreign invaders. They are me. And therefore, I don't want to do battle with myself. And so instead, I want to understand myself, and I want to heed the message of all of this and the deep learnings and the deep blessings and all of this. And that's an unpopular, I guess, belief system around this. And it's not the common paradigm.
Yeah. It's hard when you're on the outside of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard when you're on the outside, because I remember there was somebody in my community I was dating at the time. Actually, I think back, I was like, I was filled with cancer and there's a girl who had thyroid cancer that I was very much in love with. And we started to date. And I just remember there was a reverence that I had about her because of what she had went through. And there was I was like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that you're 25 years old, 24 years old, and you've had to deal with this. It was it came in every conversation that I had with her.
Wow.
And to be on the other side of that, I can see people, they're like, they can sort of understand it, but you cannot imprint the lessons and experiences that you go through. It's just something, I say I'm a lucky one, but that can be really triggering to people.
Wow. That's very interesting. Freddie, remind me how old you were when you went through this process.
I just turned 46 in February. So I was 26.
Yeah. You were also before your, what they call your first Saturn return. So this crossroad and like, who am I?
Oh, I didn't know.
Still filling in the gaps of figuring out who you were at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wild I look back, I knew nothing. I always tell people I was like, oh, I was double fisting Egg McMuffins on the way to chemo.
100%. Yeah. And I went into I'm going to be a vegan overnight, but it was like iceberg lettuce and, like fake cheese whiz and elastic dill pickles was pretty much my food of choice at that time, because I was still like a total junk food vegan. Right. And then it was awful. So where I thought I was doing myself good, I actually did a lot of damage.
Of course. Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Think about the metabolic value there as your body's trying to fight something. You're like, I'm going to take away all vital nutrients for you. All of it. Let's see how you do now, immune system.
Separate the gut even further than it already was beforehand. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Like, do you get a sense, I mean, you've probably talked about this on your podcast because you said like, this is your realm here, but do you have a sense of the collective, because there's never one thing, right? I think people are like, well, what's the one thing that caused the cancer? What's the one thing that cured your cancer? It's neither. There is no such thing as one thing. So do you have a sense of like what accumulated in your bucket and what the final like straw that broke the camel's back was for you?
Oh, do you mean to lead into the cancer?
Yeah.
I've actually seen it in an EMDR session. I saw the moment when I shut down my heart and I got cancer. Yeah. I saw it. And like now this probably sounds weird. Freddie, what do you mean? I had a very traumatic first love experience, which ended very abruptly. And it was beyond the pain. I remember to drop into my knees and I remember shutting down. I remember saying, I'll never do that again. Never going to hurt like that again. And it's been wild to unpattern.
Wow.
And I saw it and, I had these things. It's like, and from 17, I had some pretty wild health stuff rolling up to the cancer. One morning I woke up with full body rheumatoid arthritis. Hair started falling out at 18, just like I had things that I look back, I'm like, what were you doing, dude? Why didn't you go?
Yeah.
Yeah. The amount of sadness and shame as a result of the loss of some of those things, like the vitality. I done 2 episodes on hair loss, which I'll tell you, as bad as cancer was, when I was 18 and I had like this Brad Pitt mane and I brushed through it one day in my freshman year of college and a big clump fell out, I was making a deal with the devil. I was like, I will give you my soul if my hair can come back. I mean, I was that upset because it was this, I was, doing Broadway music theater. I had a great voice. I was going to do this professionally. And in my head, that shut that door forever.
Wow.
And I would have done anything to get my hair back. And, these things escalated, but it was, man, to tell people at home the validity of an experience coming in and causing a malady.
Yes.
Within the deep repatterning of a great therapist with a tool like EMDR, the way I smell is different.
The way you smell things outside, or the way your body smells out to the outside world, or both?
The way I smell things, like, my smell, everything's heightened. Colors are brighter.
Right.
Sex feels like amazing again. Tactile to all these things where my nervous system is just like
woke up again.
Yeah. It's like, let's just turn the volume down for everything.
Which, don't you think that's the ultimate experience of depression, is the volume is turned down of everything?
Yep.
That's super interesting. Well, a couple things that just struck me by what you said is that you recognize, like in that EMDR session, what was the stab, the penetrating, a catalyst.
A deep wound.
Deep wound. And it's interesting because this showed up in your body physically in the colorectal region, right?
Right.
So from Chinese medicine,
testicular.
So in that whole...
In that zone. Yes. Crotchal reason, as Ron Burgundy would say. Yeah.
The crotchal region, the crotchal nethers, but that whole bowl, right? And Chinese medicine is like where all the residue, like all the stuff settles out.
Yeah.
Life. So I think that was just interesting of where it physically showed up is very telling. And then the other part of it that you mentioned is you had symptoms. And so one of my patients calls it putting a sticker over the check engine light on the dashboard of your vehicle.
Yeah.
And that was the same type of thing. Like the thing that happens for me is when patients tell me, or the colleagues that I train to support them now, is that, I was healthy until I got cancer. And that one just gobsmacks me every single time that, it's this, I don't mean this harsh, but it's just a reality. that's delusional. There's
Right.
no way. Now talk about the polarities here. You can be healthy and thriving with cancer, but you do not end up with cancer while, if you're healthy and thriving. Like once it's established, it's there, you can thrive with it. But to turn it on and get it moving about the building and doing its thing requires some other things to develop over a long period of time. And so that's why I asked you if you kind of had a sense of building, big kablam, hello, here we are. So super interesting. Yeah.
It's wild. There's other little layers and it's always a process of discovery. I'm always peeling back another layer of the onion. But truly, I hear people say this. It's like an onion. Mm. My functionality is just one, like, I'm to the point I'm like putting muscle back on and food sensitivities are gone and I'm sleeping good again. And it's always, every year I've got like 6 or 7 pretty big wins. But I bring in a deep level of awareness to celebrate the wins, which, as you said before, it's like we kind of make this agreement, like, I just want to live, or ... I'll be happy when.
Right.
And until I get to the bar, there will be no happy. I'm not going to allow myself happiness. So that was a thing that I really needed to kick early on. And I think that's why I've had upward growth, where that's not always the way.
So you pulled conditional out of your vocabulary. Like you pulled that and so like conditionally I'll be happy when, or conditionally I will love when, or conditionally I'll feel better when, or conditionally. So you seem to have removed that. And I feel like that's a superpower. Mm-hmm. That's a very difficult one to relinquish.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. And I understand. Yeah, I did it because I'm me. I did it because there's something in my DNA that is wired that way to allow that happening. But now I preach that. I preach that. I'm like, I did it. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. You could do
it. No one knows what the fuck they're doing. Wow. Yeah.
I want to go back to the funeral, Amelia's funeral. We're in this building and it's just heavy. And there's all these little kids running around and they're playing and they're giggling and they're running up and down the aisle. And then they're, they didn't know. They were just like, I love this reminder. Like this grief is taught, I know grief is a part of separation, and like these little kids, they're just like, they're wired for joy.
100%. And you showed exactly in that moment that there were 2 things happening simultaneously, filling the space simultaneously.
Oh yeah.
That's huge. And, I love that you brought up the grief piece. In Sanskrit, grief is guru, and guru is teacher. And so from that, even we can learn. It's like, and that's just what's so huge is you've got to live and witness. Now, I'm curious, Freddie, because a lot of people would sit in that room and have, like, I kind of imagine 3 personalities coming forth with what you just described. One of them is that they are so caught up in the grief and loss, because it is really hard. I mean, grief and loss is it just is, right? It's very, very difficult, that they won't even notice the joy, that's the life that's actually flying and moving around them.
Yeah.
That's one category. Then you have the category of you, like recognizing the polarities happening simultaneously, room for both, that actually fills you with hope and a knowing that you have got resilience and ways to deal with this, right?
Yeah.
There's the other group that's actually pissed off that someone's letting kids run around in this room.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
And that's an interesting persona, because you see that a lot when someone is in a place of struggle. My husband said this to me once about a thing he recognized about my relationship with my mother. And so she's still with us, and she may watch this or may not watch this. But the one thing that my husband said to me, and it really brings something to me, is my joy brings her pain. And that hit me really hard, to recognize that I limit my light around her for her to feel comfortable. And it was almost like the moment he said that, it released something in me that said, I don't have to do that anymore. I mean, this is like just a few years ago. This is a journey. I've been on my own health journey for so long. And I feel like that was such a piece missing for me, to recognize places where I dimmed my light for the comfort of others. And I just was curious if you ran into any of that at Amelia's celebration of life, if you saw those kind of, silos showing up in that space and felt what people were experiencing in that space.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting, like this, in the past few years, kind of the Marvel universe has went into the multiverse. And that's exactly what I see a lot in life. I'm like, man, everybody's like on a different level of experiencing the same Whole Foods or, the same funeral. I'm looking around and, people are heartbroken and sad and people can barely speak. And yes, other people that, that of course there's anger. And I mentioned her brother got up and he was such an interesting character. And, there's no masculine, feminine. So he kept saying he, and I'm like, oh, this is so endearing. But I'm sure there were other people like judging his language. And yeah, I had to sing. She was like, asked me to sing. I know. I was like, oh my God. And so I had this experience where I didn't know. I had two songs in my head. I had this beautiful, beautiful song from Full Monty, which is, it's basically like a You'll Never Walk Alone. Then there was another one that's kind of cheap and cheerful. It's called Old Friends from Merrily We Roll Along. It's such a cute song. So cute. It's about, there's nothing like an old friend. There's new friends. They'll do in a pinch. But who's like us, damn few. So I didn't know what to sing. And I was like, I'm sitting there. And 2 nights before the funeral, I'm in my room, in my bedroom over here. And 4 a.m, the door goes, poof, door opens up. And someone walks in the room and says, friend.
Wow.
And I had my fan on. So you have a fan on and someone stands in front of the fan and the noise changes?
Yeah.
Noise changed. I was terrified, full body goosebumps. I'm hiding under the sheet.
Holy crap.
Under the sheet. And I just kind of breathe. I could feel my heart was like boom, 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 boom. I did breath work just to bring myself back into my body and fell asleep again. And I didn't think about it.
Wow.
And so I didn't pick the song till I got up there. And I was like, I looked around. I was like, she wants me to sing Friends, Old Friend.
Oh my God, I got chills.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It was wild. It was wild. Yeah. And I mean, just like, this happened to me one other time in my life. I was like, somebody just sat on the end of my bed and the bed went down and there's a crease there. I'm not crazy. Yeah. So that realm.
Wow. Freddie, I love that you just gave me goosebumps in remembering a moment of a family, a woman that I cared for. So the whole reason I got into naturopathic medical school. So just this is important. So I promise there's a place with this story.
Oh, it's all important.
I brought it in here. So I was in pre-med, and after my diagnosis, I kept my diagnosis very secret that's a whole nother thing. But I just needed to get through this program. And I decided instead of going to conventional medical school, I wanted to go to naturopathic medical school. But all of my professors, I needed letters of recommendation for my application. They all refused to write it for me because they said I was wasting my brain, my knowledge, because I was a really good student, to go to nature. They thought I was settling or really selling myself short to go into naturopathic medicine versus conventional medicine. Now, little did they know that conventional medicine had failed me miserably. And the only reason I was even alive and in those classes to begin with was because of stepping outside of that arena, because standard of care said, there's nothing you can do for you, go out to pasture and die. I was like, well, while I'm dying, I want to understand why. And in that, I started figuring out a few things along the way. So I didn't expect to survive, but I also knew that I was not going to go to the conventional medical training that I had spent my whole life preparing for, right? Wanted to change. The only professor who was willing to write my letter of recommendation ended up years later, I became the doctor for his wife, going through her end-stage cancering process, who standard of care had taken a very aggressive, very rare cancer type and taken her as far as it could go. And in the end, quality of life was what was so important to her and her family and the relationship. Her husband was my biochemistry professor. Her family became patients of mine. Like, it was generational. I watched grandchildren being born throughout her dying process. So I got to be with them very, very close. And in the last few months of her life, I was at her home doing a lot of home visits, care for her at the end. And I was with her in her last moments, in her last breath. And the whole room, like the singing, everything that happened, and this bird that came to the windowsill while we were there, it was pretty powerful. Well, 2 nights later, I am sleeping, much like what you described. And I hear somebody walking. We lived in a 1908 house with wooden floors, and you hear the creaking on those floors. And I heard the doors open to my room. My husband and I were sleeping in the same bed. I hear that they come around to my side of the bed. And exactly as you described, I feel the bed sink as someone sits down. And I open my eyes enough to see in the light that there is a woman sitting there, and she takes my hand and she presses something into my hand. And I feel it so specifically. Like I know exactly the weight, the temperature, the knobs. Like I feel everything so specifically. So I get a sense of who this was and what this was about, but there were no words spoken. It was just something handed to me. So the next weekend was her memorial, and her family came to me and said, "We've got something for you. Margaret wanted to share something with you." And I said, "I've got to tell you about this dream I had." And I explained to them what happened in my dream, and they all just get this look on their face. And one of the daughters like, "I'll be right back." And she goes into the house and she comes out and she takes my hand and she presses this thing into my hand. And it was exactly what had been pressed into my hand from that night. And it was this rock, this like fossil rock that was given to her by a shaman in the last few months of her life. And it was like a healing rock for transition. And it's still on my altar today of this piece. But it's like when folks say these things aren't possible, don't happen, those leave with you. And like you, Freddie, I've had so many experiences like that. But when you shared about the walking in, the door opening up, it's like we all have these experiences, but we often don't choose to listen to them or certainly share about them in a public platform. You're a little bit batshit crazy, but it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. And to be able to share that with her family, it brought them such peace to know that she was able to reach out in such a way. It brought a level of peace and connection into this day. That was, my God, that was so many years ago. And I'm still so close to her family. In fact, her granddaughter, who was very young at the time she died, is now going to college, and her plan is to become a cancer researcher. I mean, like generations later, this is impacting all of us. So people like Amelia and these other amazing people, they may physically not be in this form anymore, but they are certainly with us. And so my fear of death is not, I don't have a fear of death. I just don't. And I don't know if that's because I faced my own so deeply, but I've also helped other people in that transition. And so I haven't fought I have to live no matter what. So therefore I'm going to focus so hard on not dying that I'm going to forget to live. I'm the opposite. And it's just interesting to me. It's hard you can't do that for somebody. You can't shift their mindset to help them understand the importance of living fully now in this moment with as much exuberant joy and vitality as possible.
Yeah.
That's something you can't give a methylene blue for.
No, none of it. None of it. I think there's so many things that reside on that program that's running inside.
Yeah.
And how do you repattern?
Yeah.
How do you repurpose some of those thoughts that loop?
You started the Repattern. You mentioned EMDR. That is such a powerful tool. It's a tool I used and continue to use today. What were the tools that helped you start to repattern?
I mean, a lot of it was physical for me. I started, my short list is like, I started organically found out that I needed to add electrons to the body. My body was tired. So I really got into PEMF for years and years and years, pulsed electromagnetic field and frequency therapy, and found one that really worked for me. I started doing full body red light therapy, standing in front of a panel and just like letting that soak in for 20 minutes. My food. And I picked one day, I was like, okay, everything changes from now on. Never bought another piece of bread, never ate sugar, didn't have dairy, just clean vegetables, clean proteins, just elite. Every time I drink water, I think about what's the source, where does it come from? Is it structured? Things like sleep, really making a sleep sanctuary. Sleep was a challenge for me for a long time. I'm just really dialing in sleep.
Wow.
Honestly, like now, like the last year, it's been a lot better. Finding some way, whatever it is, to off-gas the nervous system.
Oh, that's an interesting way to describe it. Off-gas the nervous system.
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always think about like, what are the ways in which something other than self can leave the body? So I think of like the primary emunctories, like large intestine, kidneys, skin, breath, the lungs, and then nervous system.
Cool.
So I'm like, how am I getting things because none of those things aren't me. So how am I letting that out? And there's, I've been to therapy is, cognitive behavioral therapies never like nailed it home. I never noticed a state of improvement where, there was some tons of woo-woo in there at different levels. And, I'll say a little, sometimes plant medicine and sometimes ice baths, which I experience as a spiritual experience for me. I have a crazy shift in my awareness around ice. Really high states of holotropic breath work have been great. But the biggest nervous system for me has been EMDR. And, you stack that with microdosing and an ice bath and you push a little weight in the morning, then you got some magic. Then you're like, oh my God, people are like, I want what you have. I'm like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And it took you a lot of years to find the cocktail that's working for you in this current moment.
Right. I mean, the thing is I was looking for the long time, I looked for the golden bullet. I was like, I want it to be PEMF, or I want it to be red light therapy, or hyperbaric chamber, or, full body stem cell procedure. I wanted it to be just the one thing that would have just such a dramatic reduction in my pain and suffering. And that I never found that thing.
Because it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. Yeah. So now it's just all layered in. I love my castor oil packs at night. It's like castor oil, nebulizing. And then I in this midst of searching, it's like, well, where does this exist in nature? Where's the free version of that?
Gorgeous. Yes.
Where it's accessible for everybody. Because I do think I know it's there. As I was wandering around. Do you know Dean Hall?
Oh, just I don't know personally, but yeah.
So Dean, I was teaching at a retreat with Dean in Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. I didn't know Dean from a hole in the wall. And we just now he's going to come stay at my house. Oh, wow. Also with Dr. Piper, all the people. I'm like, come stay. Such a good guy. But he, people would read his book and they'd be like, oh, you cured your cancer from swimming in a river for 183 miles with an ice. He's like, actually, he's like, I was walking barefoot in these special pine needles in the woods on overnight excursions. I was swimming in this cold water. But more importantly is that what I heard was I wanted to die and I wanted to let my daughter know that I was a hero. So I latched onto this purpose of being able to do something that was so much bigger than myself. He goes, I think it was the dream that was like this incredible air balloon that drove me right up through the atmosphere. And I stepped out of the river and my cancer was gone. My stage 4 lymphoma, leukemia was gone.
I love it.
So yeah, purpose.
Exactly. I was just going to say, because there are studies that show people that lack purpose have poor prognoses. Mm-hmm. And so my 3 questions to patients are always, for what brings you joy, for what are you grateful, and what did you come here to do? What is your purpose? Yeah. And I will tell you, the people who suffer the most, the people who are struggling the most, the people who are less responsive to whatever therapy, the best of the best standard of care, the best of the best alternative, the best of the best combination of the two, they are the ones who are without joy, gratitude, and purpose.
Yeah.
Or some limitation in one, if not all 3 of those. And so that speaks volumes. And it also just reflects back to, I started having visions and downloads of what was to come from being dealt this card, set of cards in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And purpose was definitely, that has been my guiding light. And so I knew exactly what that looked like and have not faltered from that. I'm 32 years in, I'm trotting towards that goal. And so I'm like, well, I can't go yet because I'm not there. I haven't done it yet. So I'm close, but I'm not, So I've got this, I can't go yet. There's still too much to be done. And so I really love I do remember hearing a podcast with him about some of this story, but I don't think I understood. I don't think I heard it to the depth of what you just shared.
He's a great speaker. Owen Wilson?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you close your eyes, he's like an older Owen Wilson. He's very charming, real easy. Just an awesome guy. I'm excited to get to know him more.
I love it.
On a deeper friendship level. The thing I left out this is kind of funny about cancer, is that my cancer had spread to all my lymph nodes in my belly. So I had 9 tumors wrapping around my heart, and my vena cava going to my heart. My left kidney was surrounded with a tumor, and they're like, oh, it's everywhere. And that's all we ever talked about, my lymph. They were like, oh, we're just going to cut it out. There was no conversation about lymph nodes. And so I've been working with this company, Flopresso, and this woman, Desiree Despong, over the last year. And I didn't know. I'm like, wait, all my B cells, T cells, macrophages, my whole immune system is in my lymphatic, and that's how it would proliferate an organ. And nobody talks about this. Yeah, it was wild to me. I was like, what a blind spot. So I've been doing Flopresso once a week since March, and had again, just great things that I never thought would go away are like, oh my, that's not a thing anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so interesting you brought that up, Freddie, because a lot of people, again, we like, oh, it's in the lymph nodes, so therefore it's stage 4 and now it's on the move. And they forget, like you just said, but they're doing their job. That's their. So we're going to cut all those out. We're going to take away our garbage collectors, because what happens over time. And so there were studies over my career. This has been an ongoing debate in even conventional oncology as to whether lymphatic involvement is the body doing its job or the cancer progressing. It's been almost a 50-50 split in that philosophy. And so it's very interesting to me that this came up sort of organically, because I will tell you, it has not been, no one has made a definitive answer to what this is really about. But as a clinician who's seen this in so many patients, my inclination is that the lymphatics are our friend doing their job, and we need to support them to ingest, metabolize whatever it is they're taking in and help it rid out of the system. And so, but that terrifies people. I mean, still a massage therapist and other people are like, oh, don't, massages, you can't do massages.
100%.
Like, oh, that's not true anymore. We debunked that decades ago. And yet that's still the ethos, that's out there. Or careful with pumping the lymphatics or seeing a massage therapist. This is a place that really does need some revisiting.
Yeah. I just, again, because I'm an all miracle person, I don't think the body makes mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
So I always go back to that. I was like, are you a mistake? Is this cancer progressing as a mistake? Body seems pretty smart for me. And so it's just that, that's my default. So I'd say, and then the other thing, it's like, if we look at the lymphatic system, and it's kind of where like the physical meets the soul. You know how one side is this little trunk over here and then 70% is served on the big side? It's really fascinating to me when we think about the energetics of letting go of your garbage. Like, I don't want to stop that. So the natural mechanisms that, the last, year and a half that I've just been looking at, it's like movement. We're all stagnated.
Big time.
Do you move 10, 15,000 steps a day? Do you understand what deep diaphragmatic breathing is all day? And then the smooth muscle surrounding your lymph vessels, known as a lymphangion.
Yeah.
That's smooth muscle contracting just on its own when you're in parasympathetic. So it's like your lifestyle, if you think about those three, your lifestyle has hijacked your immune system. That's it. And most people in an audience will go, that's me. Yeah.
100%. And you just said, I love how you talked about like even the lymphangio aspect. It will not do its job if you are revving in sympathetic, which is where we're all revving.
We're all revving there.
All revving there. And you cannot heal in a sympathetic driven state. You just cannot. And so you can't, I don't care how good your biohack is, how good your therapy is, how good your trauma resolution work is, how good your diet is, how good your chemotherapy is. I don't care how good they are. If you are still revving in sympathetic, you cannot even receive the blessings. You cannot receive the miracles that you're describing. And so it takes that's the hardest work, is that awareness, that consciousness in this. And yet it's the least sexy for most people.
Yeah.
They want the very tangible, but what you're describing is the very intangible. And so it's very cool that you are now finding a therapy that's the interface between the tangible and the intangible. And that's where your focus is. I think that's really, really interesting. Yeah.
It's really interesting. We can always, the tools, I'm always fascinated because I love the tools.
Yeah.
My house is ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I'm coming to visit too. You don't know that yet, but if you're bringing
you're invited. Yeah. If you're coming to Austin, Texas, you're in the guest room.
I love it.
The technology now we have, it's like, wow, we can always make the shift.
Yeah.
But can we entrain the system to pick up the new information, embody it? Rare. That's rare. And that's what, I get, as much as a technologist as I am, and I work for a lot of these companies and consult these companies, I am so annoyed at the marketing. At our the disease is like, in a way, it's driven by capitalism, because the messaging behind the myth, it's like, it's fake. It's like, no, we can make the shift on a lot of these things. How do you embody it? How do you bring it into your being? And that's not from the tool. That's radical ownership of health, which we come back to you in the hard part. Nobody wants to hear that. Can't pull out a checkbook for that one.
Exactly. Can't pay our way out of this one or hack our way out of this one. It's an inside job for sure.
It's an inside job, which is why I had you on the podcast, because, it's heartbreakingly, I've had so many young friends getting cancer lately. I'm not going to go into it too much. I'll have a response. It hurts. It hurts to have all my friends that are sub 40, 45, 42, 41, 38, 26, 18, dealing with these I was fine. And now I'm not. I'm filled with tumors all over the map. And I'm like, this seems, either it's because it's my pond and I'm looking for it, or the numbers are dramatically increasing in cancers amongst young people.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, how can I be of service? I can have people like you on. I can have Katie Deming on. I can have Dr. Dixon Tom. We can keep having this cancer conversation. But I'm feeling called to really have like a better network of like, where do I point you? Because your book is the most mentioned on the podcast because it was really great for me. It's a really wonderful framework. I bought it in like a long time ago.
That's the olden days.
When did it come out?
2017, and it's still really dang relevant, which is, there's some.
Probably 2017.
Yeah, amazing.
Probably right around there when it came out. Yeah. I think I heard you on Dave Asprey's podcast in like 2018.
Yeah, that would have been summer 2018, I think, when
kicking cancer's ass with a keto diet.
Oh my God, that was so funny. And talk about just like getting message out there. And people still find me to this day from that conversation.
Oh, of course. You got an awesome platform.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, I really love that you brought this up because, first of all, I really appreciate that you brought up the fact that younger and younger people are meeting this diagnosis younger and younger ages, but even with more aggressivity than we're accustomed to. Cancer historically has been considered a disease of the aged. All right. That's how it was classified.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, so when I left med school, the average age of a patient with cancer was 68. By the time I was deep into private practice, the average age had dropped to about 58. Now, from World Health Organization, whatnot, we're now in the mid 40s is the average age. So that is not because we're, they always say it's because we're diagnosing earlier and our technologies are such we can catch things sooner. But the crazy part is, well, that might be the case. But the reality is that our overall survival and our progression-free survival has not changed. We might be diagnosing them sooner, but we don't change their outcomes with the standard of care as is.
Yes.
In a dramatic way, just by saying, oh yeah, you do have cancer. So now we're going to throw everything in the dog at it and see what happens. So first of all, I want to acknowledge when you said just maybe it's because you're looking within your own little pond. I thought that too. But now that I have currently, to date at the time of this podcast, I have 268 clinicians, 300 patient advocates in 39 countries. My newest addition of doctors in training right now, we have 54 new clinicians from all over the world that just started. We have next month, so far we have over 75 people registered in the patient advocacy. What I'm finding is this is a common pattern and a global experience. And most of the doctors and advocates who are coming to us because they're seeing things that they've never seen in their entire careers. They never wanted to work with cancer, but you don't have a choice today if you're a clinician on the planet today. When the World Health, right now, 1 in 2 people, it used to be 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women. Now it's 1 in 2 people across the board will experience cancer in their lifetime. And the World Health Organization just published studies showing that our cancer rates will double globally by 2040. And that will have another, expecting another explosion beyond that into 2050. So this is new. This is different. This is not you just looking at a particular pond. And it drives me crazy that no one is out there asking why. My entire reason I'm still on this planet 32 years after a terminal diagnosis is because I asked why. And I'm still asking why for myself and the tens of thousands of patients I've directly had a hand in their exploration, as well as the hundreds of thousands of patients I've had an indirect hand in their exploration, to know that we are not asking the right questions, and therefore we're not able to offer the right tools to support this. So I so appreciate your platform in helping people say, I can't just get away with being young and dumb. Right? I can't, I got to be aware. I got to start to, dig deeper. I got to look under the hood well before there's a problem. I got to stop putting the tape over the check engine light. I have to take some accountability, some responsibility. And the old adage of moderation, including moderation, we'd have to just throw that shit out the window.
Yeah.
On the planet we live on today, until we all become activists to change the planet that we're living on, we won't change these outcomes. And so we have to be little advocates and activists in our own selves, in our own homes, in our own communities, in our own, cities, and our own, countries. It's pushing us to be engaged in a way that we've never been engaged before.
Yeah, I feel that. I really do feel that people are asking me questions about things that they never would have. They'd been like too out of scope. And I do think as it get pushed into the public arena, goodness, Gary Brecka was on Joe Rogan like a month and a half ago. And I was like, oh my God, they're talking about PEMF and red light and multi-step oxygen therapy. This is loco. The bros are going to get it. They're going to be, because typically, like in my experience with working in sales and marketing consultant for some of these companies, it's always the women who would reach out and be like, I'm going to buy this for my family.
Yeah.
It's changing.
It is.
It's totally changing.
And that what I think is so cool is it's changing in that the biggest changes I've seen in medicine in general over the past 10 or 15 years was not from inside, like medical institutions, in that, research institutions, academic institutions. That's not where the changes have happened. It's happened in the biohacker community, which tends to be historically the people drawn to alternative or integrative care in medicine in general, not just cancer, but in general, were women, 80%, by the way. The switch, though, in the biohacker world is that it's 80% men. So there's like a beautiful crossing, like integration of that information, because it's taking folks who are very systems thinkers, the people in the data, like in technology, in, engineering. These are the brains that are making the biggest changes in medicine today. Then they're not even in the biomedical field. That's what's so cool to me. And that's also why it's engaging more people than ever before. And those are where our solutions lie right now, not within academia, who frankly is not inspired enough to make the changes. And what we know is that your listeners probably have heard of this term, and you likely have, is this concept of the 17-year gap. That is the gap between the moment we say, oh, we just got an IRB approved by the NIH or the FDA or whomever to study this therapy. By the time it goes through that process and becomes out there for the rest of the world to assimilate or use, it's an average of 17 years.
Yeah.
Who in our world has 17 years to wait to see if something?
Nobody.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's why we be trying hydrogen peroxide enemas at the wrong dose.
3 drops.
3 drops. No, seriously, I just want to insert this as we have these conversations and you hear this on a podcast. I never want anyone to take anything I say as something you should go try. It's like a jumping off point to go learn, because man, the older I get, the less I can say, I don't want to recommend anything, especially a supplement. Right. I was like, well, I don't know how that is going to interact with your metabolic pathways. Could be real bad for you. That green tea could be real bad for you. And it's so individualized. I would love to, because I've heard you talk about this before. You did say, I want to just click back, we don't change outcomes. When we look at standard of care, talk to me about that statement and that phrase, and talk to me about outcomes within the current world of oncology.
Yeah. So your listeners need to understand that there's only one. So in cancer care and standard of care oncology, first of all, there's only 2 people that can legally say they treat cancer. Okay. One of them is a board certified oncologist, and the other is a board certified dental surgeon. Those are the only 2 populations that can legally treat cancer. So I want your folks to hear that. So when having people like me or other integrative therapists on board, if we're working with people with cancer, we're working with people that happen to have cancer. We are not claiming to treat cancer. So I just want to put that out there. The other weird thing about the oncology space is if you are alive 5 years after your diagnosis, they go to their little booklet and be like, cure, even if you die 5 years and 1 day after. You still get chalked up of, oh, you were alive 5 years after this diagnosis, therefore that is considered a cure, which is really weird. Okay. So it's talk about just someone choosing their data, cherry picking what they publish about. Then the other word that gets people confused. So when I have patients that are looking at like clinical trials, for instance, the discussion about what is the actual benefit of this trial? Like how much progression-free survival are you going to have? Meaning, okay, you're progressing, this medication comes on and stops the progression. It doesn't take the cancer away, but it stops it until it doesn't. And so how long is it until it starts to get on the move again? That's considered progression-free survival. Like how long? Is that days, weeks, months, years? Right? And then the overall survival is overall, what did it do to your longevity? Right? Whether you were on your deathbed for the last 2 years of your life, they don't care about the quality of your life. They just care about the actual numbers on the calendar, days on the calendar. That's what we measure for outcomes, for success. Those are the metrics we measure everything to. The other thing that's really important is for folks to understand that the clinical space, the clinical research space, so a phase 1 clinical trial, when I hear people get really excited in our world who are like, oh my God, I'm going to get my friend into this clinical trial. I can't wait. And I look at it. Okay, if it's a phase 1 clinical trial, you guys, this is not at all about worrying about progression-free survival or about overall survival. It's simply looking at, will this drug just outright kill this person?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's looking at, period. It's a complete guinea pig experiment. Phase 2 is when they say, what is the maximum tolerated dose we can give for them not to be pushed over the edge? So the first one's like to establish general safety. The second is, what is the furthest we can push them to with regards to safety? And phase 3 is when we start to look at, what type of a difference does this make in progression-free or overall survival? So I really tell patients, unless you are wanting to donate your body to science, and I'm going to piss off a lot of researchers, a lot of academic institutions right now saying this because I just hurt their quota and I hurt their funding because they're constantly trying to recruit for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. But again, now that your listeners have a sense that the average of those trials to actually be published and be something actionable is 17 years. So you're not going to see the benefit of this in your lifetime, nor is anybody that you're caring for. And you don't really know if it's going to do anything until you get to a phase 3. So I'm telling people, like, if you have any chance at all, and a phase 1 or 2 is the only thing offered, and you are in a pretty good quality of life and state, you might want to reconsider donating your body to science before your time is up. Mm-hmm. So that's just, I want to have that framework so people understand, because when we finally publish these studies and we say, we see the headlines, we see the sexy abstract titles, and we get like, oh my God, there's a cure for lung cancer. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, it was a mouse study that just showed that these mice, equivalent in human years, extended the life by a few weeks or a few months. So there was a study that came out a few years back. I can get you if your listeners want to take a look at this, but they looked at 96 drugs over a 17-year period of time. Okay, all in the oncology space that were considered blockbuster drugs, meaning they had a really good benefit. The average overall survival rate, when you put all those in a bucket, do you remember, have you read this study? Do you know what the outcome is?
I think, it was really bad.
So the overall, the best we were able to do was 2.4 months of extended life.
Yeah.
So when I look at that, when I'm working with someone, I'm talking about outcomes, I'm talking about that type of outcome. That it is not, and we're spending billions on studies to get us maybe a few weeks to a few months down the road.
Yeah.
And no one's talking about what was the quality of that person.
Yeah, that's the big one for me.
It's massive. And what's very interesting is how many patients in my career have opted to do nothing because they're like, nah, I read the data. It might give me a couple months. I'd rather do nothing. I'd rather go on a road trip for a couple months. And how many of those patients are still here years later?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So it's funny. We took a group of 11 patients that were all had terminal cancer. They were all in hospice eligible, so meaning less than 6 months to live. So they were also now no longer doing any other therapies. And we took them into the jungles of Mexico and saw a Huichol medicine man who performed a very specific Huichol healings on these folks and took them on a peyote journey. All but one of those people are still with us today. And that was in 2016.
Wow. That's amazing.
Right. And the patients I've had who were the first patients that went through the trials at Harvard for the psilocybin end of life trials, I had 11 patients go through those trials. all of them are still here. And that was in 2010 to 2013 window.
Unreal.
Yeah. And they were all end stage, so it's like, this is the place where people, you don't see those filling up the medical journals.
Mm-mm.
Because then when someone comes to me and hears me tell these stories, like, that's just anecdotal. I'm like, okay, anecdotally, tens of thousands.
Tell that to their family.
Exactly. And that's where this is what I'm asking, Freddie, for your listeners, for you, for others. Why are we all not shouting from the rooftops about our anecdotal N-of-1 experience is just as valid as these 17-year studies that are looking like there's something here. Right. It's so weird to me that there's such a disconnect of finding any value in these types of outcomes.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. So, you have a belief system, you have this information that you've combed through, you have a lived experience, you have these trials that you've had your people enrolled in.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the frustration of knowing,
really.
of your deep inner knowing? You're like, I know, or your deep inner knowing that it's not about the next magical drug to come along, that we have things that could change the quality and impact of people's lives today. How do you deal with that frustration, not being able to get the word out?
I'll tell you, for 20 years, it took its toll on my health, on my psychology, on my physical health. I would say I was bopping up and down into the cancering spectrum quite a lot during that time. It was more of a bumpy ride because I take things in so personally, so somatically. So when I'm under stress, when my nervous system is in that somatic, complete sympathetic overdrive, it takes its toll on me really easily. And so I spent the first 20 or so years of my career trying to fix the broken system, trying to convince people, trying to drag people kicking and screaming over to my philosophy, to my belief system. When I finally let go of that and decided, F that, I'm just going to build a new system, and anyone who wants to get on my arc can join me, and we'll see what happens with this. And so that's what I have slowly been building. Like I said, we're now 39 countries globally. We're now looking at actually creating some more systemized approaches with the way we present this methodology into the healing space. We are building a data platform to collect all the metrics and all the information I'm telling you. So when they say there is no data, we'll be like, well, no one's measured it, but we are. We're building the lab that's doing the evaluations on what's working, what's not working. When someone says, oh, this, for instance, methylene blue is very helpful on your complex 1 of your mitochondria. Well, we're actually testing that in a lab to show this is in fact what it's doing in real time, both in cell line, animal, and human studies. So we're doing the research, we're collecting the data, we're building the new medical system, and we're training the masses to know how to apply it. And so that's where now it's like exponential of the stories I get to hear. And it's exponential of how many people are seeking us. So just an example, we are sucky at marketing. We do none. We're terrible. We have a horrible website. Like at some point, we should have the money or the bandwidth or the resources, the human hours to do what needs to happen, actually get our website up and doing its thing. But last month alone, with nothing, we had 35,000 people come to our directory looking for a clinician trained in this methodology. We have about 150 listed on our directory. These doctors, I mean, the ones that aren't even on that we've trained, they just can't take any more clients. We literally do not have enough people to meet the demand. So now that we're up at this point, that's when I know like we are coming into that 100th monkey process where now all the things I fought so hard to communicate about are now becoming like household names. Like I would talk about terrain until I was blue in the face. And now I see the word terrain everywhere, even in care, or tumor microenvironment everywhere, or metabolic health everywhere. 2 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so there's an exponential process happening now that I'm feeling I didn't expect to see this, frankly, in my lifetime, because it was so slow going for those first couple of decades. But the exponential process, because of people like you, Freddie, because of people in the space, because of the horrors and the wonders of social media, right? It got both ends, again, happening simultaneously. There's space for both.
Yes.
We are reaching the masses in a way that we, the consumer, are demanding something different. And that's when things will change.
Yeah. Yeah. I ask you that because once in a while I'll talk to people in the space and it's like, I feel how what they're holding in their container and the frustration and the rage. I'm like, oh my God, it's like, it almost makes you like, turns you back into a villain.
Yeah.
Like you become a caricature of yourself.
Yeah.
I know that's not you.
It was. It totally was. I will own that. It was a time when I was like, there was so much rage and fury that it actually incapacitated me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, you know what it is? You know what I really like? It's my spiritual teachers. They're like, there's a 12 guiding spiritual practices. And the one that always stands out for me right now is humility. And so whenever you look at somebody else's platform or their belief system or their message and you do this, how could they? You're like, of course they can. That's where they are. That's where they're at. That's their information. That's their story. That's their program. And I think we've just got to be able to look at people and be like, of course you can hold that belief system right now. I'll be over here with mine.
Right.
And that's all I can do. That's all I can build. Yeah. Either that, the phrase that comes up a lot is my response is my responsibility. It's probably my first t-shirt I need to make.
That's massive.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's so much there. I would love to ask you, I have this word on my page. I written down mistletoe.
Ooh.
And I would love to talk a little bit about mistletoe therapy and its beginnings. And I've spoken about this on the podcast before. And I just want to frame, we can hear, there's a time in my life, people are like, oh, you need mistletoe. This is your thing. This is going to like eradicate your tumors.
Right.
This will be your thing. Right. But let's talk about mistletoe therapy and what it is and what's your relationship with this powerful plant.
Sure. It's such a funny thing because it's definitely not a one, like, this is the one, this is the thing. Like everyone, that's the seduction that's out there always in everything.
Always.
Eat PEMF, I mean, everything, keto, vegan, whatever, always something. Everyone's like, oh, the one target, the one treatment. That doesn't exist. So this therapy, it's the most consistent integrative oncology therapy in the world. It's the most studied integrative oncology therapy in the world. It has over 2,600 good published peer-reviewed studies, published on it, as well as about 250 of them that we would consider really good gold standard in the United States through our system. I was helped with the IRB and the construction of a study that happened and was published in 2022 from Hopkins, which was phase 1 clinical trial because that's how we roll here.
That's how we roll.
And everywhere else. And it's totally safe. And we know the dosing and we know the overall survival and we know the progressive-free survival. But we have to start here on our soil because apparently we think we're the best medical system in the world, despite we're 36th in the world. Just saying.
Yeah. Behind Cuba.
Yeah. It's just crazy. And we spend, a lot of wasted money, time, and energy, which, by the way, when that started was in 2014 and it just got published in 2022. They did it fast for a phase 1. Phase 2 will take another 10 years. Phase 3, another. So we're looking at the 17-year gap before we say to the US, yes, this is a safe and effective therapy. So I say that to just get on my soapbox there, to show you how dysfunctional our system is. The other side of it is this crazy, very controversial character, philosopher, Rudolf Steiner, who the man has issues, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. Extremely controversial. And yet things like permaculture, Waldorf school education, geometry and architectural design, and medicine has a lot to thank his craziness for, right? And so mistletoe is one of those therapeutics that started being used in 1917 as a treatment in the same form as an injectable that it is still used today, which is very interesting that it's maintained the time. We started doing studies on its IV application in the 50s. We started doing intratumorals in the 70s. Like, we have known that this was our powerful immune therapy for a long time, and everyone scoffed at, poo-pooed, and ignored the immune system until we could monetize it in standard of care today, to that being the prominent driver of standard of care therapy today, despite the fact we've actually had a really cheap and effective tool for a very long time. But what I love about it is the anthroposophical philosophy behind this medicine. And this is what differentiates it of being just a tool versus a field. Okay. For lack of a better word, in that in anthroposophical philosophy, cancer is a disconnect. Okay. It's a loss of rhythm, and it's a disconnect from the micro. So down to like the molecular metabolic disconnection, cell signaling pathways, et cetera, all the way up to the macro of like to other, to self, to other, to God, to the community. And so it's a full-on disconnected process. It's also a complete loss of rhythm. And so on the planet today, especially in the last 100 years, we have all lost our rhythm. Like you can, what's up is down, what's down is up. You can now work 24/7 under blue light. Your body, Americans spend less than 15 minutes outdoors every day. Like just, you start to recognize women are like giving themselves, Depo-Provera to avoid having any periods. Like we're completely normalizing right? Like all the things, right? So exactly. Suddenly we're disconnected and we're dysrhythmic. What anthroposophical understood the mistletoe to do is to reestablish connection, rhythm, and a mantle of warmth, which has a lot of, that could go in a lot of directions, energetically, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It is a warming therapy. It is a fever induction therapy, something else we've spent the last 50 years like suppressing, right? We actually dropped our body temperature in the last 100 years because of these type of suppressive therapies, which means our immune system is off track. And so it reestablishes the natural endogenous rhythms and connections inside, but also outside. And so one of my favorite side effects of mistletoe is this improvement in quality of life. Massive. And the other favorite thing about mistletoe is it is a remedy that has always been with other therapies. It plays well with others. There are virtually no contraindications. And so it was used historically with radiation, with chemotherapy, with surgery, now with endocrine blocking therapies, targeted therapies, and even immune therapies. And so it's got this beautiful, like plays well with others approach to it. And so it's a therapy that can enhance and support a lot of other therapies. You talked about the importance of stacking earlier. This is one of those that I like to stack into the mix of people actively cancering or those looking at the long haul, especially with very aggressive types of cancers, familial, genetically kind of driven types of cancers, and high risk of recurrence type of cancers. This is a stack I like to bring into the mix. Yeah. We actually have a book co-published with 6 other really brilliant authors in this space, anthroposophical gurus in this space. It's a nonprofit book. All the funds go to research. It's called Mistletoe and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology. And it really goes into this history and this concept of the mantle of warmth and the concept of disconnect. But it also talks about what does it mean in current and future integrative oncology care.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Nasha, what are some of the therapies that you currently engage in to keep your terrain balanced? And you can do simple lifestyle things. You can do high-level biohacker things.
Well, one of my big hacks is I test. I'm really, for me, because how I feel, sometimes I'm so busy and disconnected and just like life that I need to look under the hood and make sure I'm not missing anything. So I do an annual test for myself every year. And if I'm symptomatic, I'll do it again later in the year. But every fall, I basically do a deep looky-loo through how's my immune system, what's going on with my metabolic health, what's going on with my inflammatory markers, what's going on with my cancer markers. I mean, I have to look at the whole gamut, right? I also, I'm getting ready to have my first pre-nuvo whole body imaging because I've done historically, I've used ultrasound and thermography because I got terrible gadolinium poisoning and contrast dye poisoning. My kidneys are very shot, 30 and 70% thanks to that. And I can't even chelate those things on my body because it puts my kidneys into complete failure. So I can't do your standard issue CTs or MRIs. They just don't work. And I don't want, because I've got BRCA, I don't want any more radiation. Like that is absolutely what kicks up a BRCA bad response. BRCA is about when it's working well, it's about DNA repair. And so you do not want to bring on things that are further damage your DNA, such as tons and tons of radiation, like they recommend to women and men who have a BRCA mutation. And so that's not ever going to happen. I avoid that like the plague. So I do my let's look under the hood. So my test, assess, address, don't guess. That's where I go. Then I adjust my daily supportive therapies accordingly to what that data tells me. Right. So you'll see me sometimes wearing CGMs. I'm always, I pretty much stay in a low grade level of ketosis now without trying much because I've become so metabolically flexible. I fast every day, 13 hours, a couple times a week, 16 to 18, a couple times a month, 3 to 5 days, or once a month, 3 to 5 days. That's just ongoing for over 30 years at this point.
Yep.
When I travel, I kick up high dose vitamin D3 and high dose melatonin. We're talking like 3 to 1,000 milligrams of melatonin. I go hog wild on that when I'm traveling, especially in time zones, but also all the radiation I'm getting on the airplane.
Do you oral or suppository?
I've done both. Bring them both, man. Like tie the ends together.
Yeah.
So I've done both for sure. Otherwise, I suck at taking. So I take low dose naltrexone.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one, because you talked about your rheumatoid arthritis. Like I'm like a walking collection of autoimmunity. So PCOS, endometriosis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, God knows what else of the autoimmune pattern. So low dose naltrexone has become a major hack for me. I also do 1 box of mistletoe every Christmas. That's been my ongoing hack for about the last 12 years. So I do that. And then I take magnesium every night. I've got major issues with my catecholamine SNPs. And so I am incredibly militant about magnesium to keep my nervous system on track. And meditation is an absolute daily occurrence for me. I watch the sunrise from my far infrared sauna on my patio while I meditate every morning. And that's my like stacked hack that's there. Those are like my non-negotiables I just walked you through.
Great.
Whatever in feels like it needs to come in to the mix,
What needs to come in? What was that?
Whatever. Like if I need to change, if I need to bring in some extra stress support, if I need to really work on my immune system, if I get, so I'm, this is going to probably sound controversial, but I think I'm very vulnerable to spikeopathy. And so I did not get the vaccine because of all my autoimmunity. That did not make sense to me. I also know the tools to use for myself, but I've had COVID a couple of times. I got through that just fine. But it seems like whenever I travel and get exposed to people who have been vaccinated, I get symptomatic, which is really weird. Like rheumatoid arthritis, it's really interesting. So my RA flares now only when I'm in like I was on a cruise in January at a hyperbaric oxygen cruise. And it took me almost a month to recover from that. I was almost.
Oh, what a bummer.
Yeah. But I'm learning like the hacks to use. So molecular hydrogen, proteolytic enzymes, certain things like that. I'm learning to preempt now and post treat. So I'm just like having to adjust to a new world, right? It's an adaptation that we all have to kind of figure out our way. My colleagues and I are finding that we're all experiencing these types of new issues in healthcare. So, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do for molecular hydrogen? Do you do a tablet or do you do a generator?
So for me, I do tablets when I'm traveling just because it's easy. But I have one of those little portable, I'll take my little portable molecular hydrogen generator. It's like just a water bottle. I've not bit the bullet and done the big investment yet, but that's going to be my next purchase. So I would like to know your favorite because there's a lot of great ones on the market.
Yeah. I won't speak to a brand yet because I'm still searching. I have great success with George Weissman's AquaCure, which is Brown's gas and hydrogen.
Yep.
And it's got a lifetime warranty for the price point.
Perfect.
I can't beat it.
And that's where I'm curious because there's another one getting ready to come out. I'm like you, can't speak to it yet. And he's sending me some to try. But there's another brilliant colleague, you probably know him, that's coming out soon. He's got both an oxygen water and a molecular hydrogen water that's coming out. And I'm like a living laboratory with that. So I'll check out what happens to my physiology because I am testing a lot right now because my fibrinogen went super high. My RA went super high. My CRP, which hasn't been high in 20 years, went off the charts. So I'm like, so definitely, but it's autoimmune, not cancery.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Yeah, that's when mine started. Mine was all autoimmunity.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I'll tell you 2 things that I've found that have been amazing for me are Fabrenza, high-dose proteolytic enzyme, 3 times a day on an empty stomach.
Yes.
Especially that brand, for some reason. Fabrenza just rocks.
Yeah.
I started with Wobazyme. Yeah. And then the Mega IgG from Microbiome Labs, the non-dairy Mega IgG 3 times a day, like 4 caps. It's just such a cleanup. Yep. It's like, here's a little extra immune system for you.
I will check it out.
And I'll cycle in and out of that. I've noticed really good things. But the molecular hydrogen, I was just looking at the new liters per minute, like the really high, the one like don't light a match, it'll blow you up.
Which this person blew up their lab twice in making it. So.
Oh my God, yes. So, and looking at some of the data around that as a standalone. Yeah. For me, I was like, ooh, this would be so sexy for people getting radiation. Just huge. To like be able to bag a limb. And then to eliminate all that damage after the theoretical medicine comes in. Oh. So I'm excited about those things.
Yeah. Like you're listening just to go into a PubMed search on molecular hydrogen cancer alone is rather mind-boggling. There is a lot of data. This is not esoteric woo-woo. There is something definitely happening here. And because I'm also seeing that it's breaking up fibrin more than anything, even from heparin and all the pharmaceuticals we've used that classically worked in the past, or even the things like fibrinza or wobenzym in the past that aren't, the stacking with the molecular hydrogen is the only thing I'm seeing that's starting to really break that down, which is quite interesting. And that's going to impact autoimmunity as well as cancering and other inflammatory, all the cardiovascular issues. It's going to impact all those things. So I think it might be a solution on the horizon for the issues that we are facing today that we hadn't just a few years ago.
Yeah. There's another one. There's a tab out that I got from a company in Costa Rica, which is their company's called Axiom. And they have one of the new hydrogen tabs that doesn't dissolve in water.
Oh.
You eat it. And so I think they say 6.5 times more parts per million by not letting it dissolve in water. Life Extension also makes it.
Okay.
It's a non-dissolvable tab. And they say however they've done that, they've hacked the science of that pill delivery. But man, if I do 3 of those when I get on the plane, when I get off the plane, because I traveled 40 days straight last month, I'm really amazed. And I'm like, I cannot do travel without these anymore. It's just not worth it.
I love it. Ooh, good hack. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, good hack. That and the high dose methylene blue, like once every 2 weeks. My doctor's been
Are you doing the IV? So you're doing the IV?
I'm doing an IV, Yeah. I do. He does one called the Immuno. When you're in Austin, we're going to come do this. We'll do AminoRx. Now, I'll tell you smell like garbage for a week.
I bet.
But he does a full bag of methylene blue, full bag of vitamin C, a full bag of different nutrients, a bag of DMSO.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then he does an ozone chaser with a glutathione push. You smell, but that cellular clean out, I was like, there is a stink. I mean, you smell like garlic.
I bet. Like sulfur on sulfur on sulfur.
Sulfur on sulfur on sulfur. Yeah. But I will say that's a great, you can do a couple and then come back in a year and do a couple, just because of all the, all the environmental stuff we need to. What's the data point? The fear porn marketing around how much plastic we get. It's like a credit card.
They say we're getting a credit card a week. That's how much we're getting now. Gross. Like just gross, right? It's just,
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. Well, I celebrate you. I want to ask you 2 more questions before I let you go. We could do like 10 of these, by the way.
I love it. I'll come back.
Yeah, I would love to have you back. You get a magic wand. You can turn in everybody's TV screen or smartphone to the Nasha Winters channel.
Oh, God.
And you can talk to the people of the planet and you get like a minute. What do you say to people?
Oh, man. First of all, you are far more powerful than you've been led to believe. I think that you just have to know that. Second of all, there is no utility in fear. There's like the little bit of fear of like, oh, right, don't go like pet the alligator. Like that, those are like normal built-in evolutionary fear, but to live in a place of fear is that sympathetic nervous system place. So finding whatever, I love the saying about how faith, quenches fear, love quenches fear. Like those are the pieces. Focus on where you have your faith, your love, your passion, your purpose, your gratitude to help quench that fire of fear. And third, please be curious. And please be willing to dig deeper. There is no one else coming to save you. You have to advocate and rally for yourself. And you have to do whatever means, because there are ways to look at things very inexpensively or even free for yourself. Like I teach advocates on how to do a nutritional physical exam on people, right? And like starting to just like know your body, touch your body, see how things are moving, how are your fingernails, how are the bumps on the back of your arm, what are the cracks on your heels, what's going on with your night vision. Those are clues of some of the major micronutrients that are critical to the protection of your DNA and the repair systems in your body. And so things like that are huge. But getting curious, if you have a little extra money, instead of going and spending it on a night out with friends, invest it into meaningful labs for yourself to understand what's going on under the hood so you can be empowered to do something about it. So I think those would be my things of like, you're more powerful than you're led to believe. Test, assess, address, don't guess, and turn that fear into hope, passion, and gratitude and joy.
That's beautiful. And Nasha, where can people find your training course and your platform?
Sure. So best place is probably to go to mtih.org, which stands for Metabolic Terrain Institute of Health.org. That's going to get you backtracked even into the drnasha.com website. It's going to get you to the books, Metabolic Approach to Cancer, the book Mistletoe, and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology. It's also going to get you onto the millions of podcasts I've been an honored guest on, as well as the one I just launched, which, Freddie, I'm going to have you over there, which is Metabolic Matters. We just launched that in October 2023. And then also just to know of the events that we're involved in, and then the trainings are on there, as well as the directory of clinicians and advocates who've come through our training that can serve you, whether you're dealing with cancer or someone who's trying to prevent it. Please, this is what these folks have been trained in to help you get curious and do the due diligence, do the detective work there, and know what to do if you find something. And then also the trainings themselves, we have twice a year for advocates, twice a year for clinicians, and we're getting ready to drop a kind of a do-it-yourself for the layperson community as well. So we're kind of an all-in-one, one-stop shop of empowerment, and we're, like I said, we're building out our lab, our data platform, and eventually our hospital on a 1,200-acre regenerative farm. Organic farm, so people can learn how to live healthy again on an unhealthy planet and be part of the solution versus part of the problem.
Beautiful. I love that there's a course for advocates.
Yeah.
That's the magic.
Yeah, it is the magic.
Then you just don't have to sit beside and be this bystander.
Exactly.
Just get involved. Yeah, that really hits me. It's very powerful. If you're frustrated, if you're feeling a level of frustration that you feel like your hands are tied, they're not. And this would be a great course just to be able to explore, be curious, go deeper. So I would implore everybody to check out the website, mtih.org, and go select what you feel like being served.
Love it.
It was such a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Freddie.
Joy, joy, joy.
Back at you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Joy, joy, joy. All right. More to come. Big love. Ladies and gentlemen, biologicalmedicine.org. Don't go there yet. I have a question for you. Are you tired of standing around in this deep knowing that our healthcare system is broken, but we never do anything about it? Well, Biological Medicine for Practitioners is the ultimate hybrid online and in-person certification course designed to help you integrate biological medicine or biomed into your practice. So, unlike traditional medicine that often focuses on treating symptoms, biomed treats the whole body, addressing root cause of illness through 3 pillars, that is detoxification and drainage, nutrition, and immune building. This approach is truly patient-centered and yields exceptional results. So in this comprehensive course, you will apply foundational knowledge and hands-on experience with the latest diagnostic technologies and therapies, including bioelectrical impedance analysis, heart rate variability testing, pulse electromagnetic field. I know this sounds like it was created just for Freddie, but this is your chance to become a pioneer in the field of biomed. This is for healthcare and wellness professionals, all the way from doctors to personal trainers. I want you to go to biologicalmedicine.org and look for the Enroll Now button. And if you use code BEAUTIFULLYBROKEN, you'll receive the Intro to Biological Medicine for free. That's a $200 value. Friends, let's go do this. This is our time to seize the day. Join the Biomed and help create a real paradigm shift and the way we deliver results for our patients. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break from the show and allow me to get up on a soapbox. I want to spotlight Silver Biotics Wound Gel. This is a product that is an antimicrobial layer that helps with cuts, lacerations, skin irritations, and first and second degree burns. So it utilizes silver sol technology, which we've talked about. This is the ability to steal electrons from pathogens, making it more effective in the body. So the company has substantiated its claims with 420 independent studies, as well as 60 patents pending on this groundbreaking tech. So I endorse it because it works, but also due to the extensive research and scientific validation the company has done.
So in an independent in vitro report, this is very important, we compared Armor Gel to 7 other similar skincare products, such as triple antibiotic ointment, the standard of care. The study focused on the kill rate for MRSA, VRE, E. coli pathogens responsible for severe emergency room infections. Within a 4-hour window, Armor Gel completely neutralized the pathogens, and this was a feat that was unmatched by any other product in the study. So the Silver Biotics Wound Gel stands out not only for its performance, but actually its price point. So this is a must-have for moms, for coaches, nurses, doctors, anybody concerned about the body's largest organ, the skin. And in today's environment, I just saw a fact where MRSA infections are up 35% since 2020. This is crucial. So we just need to be prepared. Don't wait for an emergency room trip. This is something to have in your cupboard. It's under $20 and you get 30% off using the code Beautifully Broken at checkout. This company is giving this to you at cost by using this code, and they are not only a sponsor of the podcast, but they are friends, and I support what they're doing in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and please leave us a review. 5 stars if you loved it. And before you leave, there is one big way you can continue the learning and the deepening of this relationship we started in this very episode. You can go to beautifullybroken.world and check out our brand new website store. Listed are all the wellness technologies, the supplements, the educational courses that I love and I personally use. Most of them offer significant discounts just by using the link or the discount code, which is normally Beautifully Broken, and they do support the podcast through affiliations. Now, we have a brand new feature. If you want to see the beautiful faces of our guests and watch me unbox and review products, you can head over to our new YouTube channel, Beautifully Broken World. I do have to tell you, our OnlyFans page is under construction, so stand by for that. This last announcement is from my vast team of internet lawyers. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only. By listening, you agree not to use the information found here as medical advice to treat any medical condition in yourself or others, and you're always going to consult your physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My closing. The world is shifting. We need you at your very best. So please take the steps to always be upgrading. Remember, while life can be painful, putting the pieces back together is a beautiful process. I love you. I'm your host, Freddie Kimmel. Big love.